They forced me to sing to my wife's severed head every night for 3 years. Chancellor Weigang and his court laughed as I wept, a castrated scholar reduced to their nightingale of grief. Now I've escaped, gathered others he's broken, and created an opera troupe unlike any other. Tonight Weigang sits in the audience of his own destruction, unaware that every act, every scene, every note is designed for his exquisite suffering. My voice once carried my pain, now it will orchestrate his screams. I still remember the moment Chancellor Weigang's men burst through our door. The splintering wood, the shouting, the fear in Liling's eyes. My wife clutched her latest scroll of poetry to her chest as if it could shield her from what was coming. "Scholar Jiang," Weigang announced, stepping through the wreckage of our simple home. "Your wife's words have finally exceeded my patience." I stood frozen, watching this monster in his opulent silk survey our modest scholar's quarters with contempt. Weigang was feared throughout the empire for his artistic cruelty, his collection of human oddities, his insatiable appetite for others' suffering. Looking back, I realize I should have grabbed the knife hidden beneath our writing table. I should have charged him, even if it meant my immediate death. At least I would have died a man. 4 guards restrained me while Weigang casually picked up Liling's scroll. He read her verses aloud, his voice mocking what she held sacred. Words of rebellion veiled in elegant metaphor about a nightingale who refused to sing for a tyrant. "Beautiful," he said, rolling the scroll carefully. A pity such talent was wasted on sedition. I struggled against the guards, my scholar's body no match for their strength. "She meant no disrespect to the emperor," I pleaded. Weigang laughed. "The emperor? You misunderstand. These are insults against me." I watched helplessly as they dragged Liling to the center of our study. Her eyes never left mine, even as the chancellor drew a curved blade from his belt. "Remember me in song, my love," she called to me. I didn't understand her words then. I was too busy screaming, begging, offering everything I had. Our meager wealth. My service. My life in exchange for hers. Weigang approached her from behind, one hand gripping her hair to expose her neck. "The empire has no need for poets who cannot control their tongues." The blade flashed. Her final words transformed into a scream that still echoes in my nightmares. I must have lost consciousness briefly. When my vision cleared, Liling's head lay separated from her body. Blood pooled across the floor, soaking the scrolls of poetry we had written together over 10 years of marriage. I remember thinking, this cannot be real. Then Weigang approached me, the same bloodied knife in his hand. 2 more guards joined to hold me down. "The nightingale needs no manhood to sing," he said, his smile revealing teeth filed to points. I knew what was coming. Stories of Weigang's eunuchs were whispered throughout the empire. Men kept for their beauty or their voices, mutilated to serve his perverted preferences. The pain that followed blacked out everything but my screams. When consciousness returned, I lay in a pool of blood, my lower body bandaged crudely. A court, physicians stood over me, ensuring I would not die before Weigang could enjoy my suffering. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning of my torment. 3 days later, when I could be moved without dying, they brought me to Weigang's palace. A golden cage awaited me in his private chambers, not for me, as I initially thought, but for what remained of my Liling. Her head had been preserved through some dark art, her features frozen in that final moment of terror. They had mounted it in an ornate silver cage, decorated with nightingales and cherry blossoms, a mockery of beauty to house this ultimate horror. "Your new performance space," Weigang informed me, gesturing to a small platform beside the cage. "Every night you will sing to your wife, laments, love songs, poetry. Make them beautiful enough, and perhaps she will respond." I looked at him, hatred burning through my shock. "I will not perform for you." His response was a blow across my face that sent me sprawling. "You misunderstand your position, Nightingale. You will sing, or I will find new ways to extend your suffering." That night began my life as Weigang's private entertainment. His court gathered in his chambers, reclining on silk cushions, drinking wine while I stood before Liling's cage. I refused to sing at first. Wei Gang merely nodded to his guards. They brought in a child, no more than 8, from the kitchens. The Chancellor personally cut off the boy's ear when I remained silent. Each refusal cost someone else a piece of themselves, he explained. How many must I mutilate before you accept your role? I sang that night. A broken, terrible sound that barely resembled music. Wei Gang and his courtiers laughed at my grief, finding entertainment in my degradation. I didn't realize then that my voice would become my weapon. Months passed, a year, 2 years, 3 years of nightly performances, 3 years of singing, to my wife's preserved head. My voice grew hauntingly beautiful through practice and pain. Court members wept at my laments, though Wei Gang never showed emotion beyond satisfaction at my continued suffering. I learned to watch during these performances, to listen, to remember. Wei Gang often conducted business during my songs, assuming I was too broken to understand or care. I cataloged his secrets, his perversions, the atrocities he inflicted on others, the names of officials he blackmailed or bribed, the locations of his hidden treasures. Behind my mask of broken submission, I studied the palace layout, the guards' rotations, the servants' routines. I noted which courtiers showed me the smallest kindness, which ones reveled most in my pain. I realized during the 2nd year that I was no longer singing for Liling. I was singing for myself, keeping my mind intact by focusing on each note, each word. And beneath every song lay the same promise: vengeance. My opportunity came during the 3rd year, at the Ghost Festival, when the palace buzzed with activity and drunken revelry. I had spent months preparing, gathering small amounts of oil from my food lamps, storing them beneath the loose floorboard under my sleeping mat. Wei Gang always insisted I sing specialized Ghost Festival songs, reminding the court of his power over the living and dead. He displayed Liling's cage prominently that night, decorated with festival offerings to mock the sacred traditions. Midway through my performance, when the wine had flowed freely and attention had shifted to a troupe of acrobats, I knocked over a lamp near the silk draperies. The fire spread quickly, aided by the oil I had strategically placed earlier. In the chaos that followed, I seized Liling's cage and slipped through the servants' passage I had memorized. Guards ran past me, focused on saving their master's treasures rather than accounting for his broken nightingale. I remember the cool night air hitting my face as I emerged from the palace grounds. Freedom after 3 years of captivity. But it wasn't freedom I sought. It was revenge. I fled through the night, Liling's cage clutched to my chest. The weight of it slowed me, but I would sooner die than leave her behind again. Behind me, the eastern wing of Wei Gang's palace burned against the night sky. Guards shouted in the distance. Bells rang out the alarm across the imperial city. My body was weak from years of captivity. The wound of my castration had healed poorly, causing pain with each step. Still, I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to collapse beneath me. I had nowhere to go. A mutilated scholar with no family, no connections, carrying a preserved human head in an ornate cage. But I had spent 3 years planning this moment, memorizing the city's layout from servants' gossip and Wei Gang's maps. I reached the edge of the imperial district where the grand houses gave way to crowded tenements. Here, in a forgotten temple dedicated to the river gods, I had bribed a caretaker months ago with small treasures stolen from Wei Gang's chambers. The old man asked no questions when I arrived, merely nodded at the key I presented and showed me to a hidden room behind the altar. I remember collapsing there, still clutching Liling's cage. For the first time in 3 years, no one watched me. No one commanded me to sing. Looking back, I should have rested longer, should have gathered my strength. But hatred and fear drove me forward. Wei Gang would hunt me. He never allowed anyone to escape his collection, especially not his prized nightingale. 3 days I spent in that temple planning my next move. The caretaker brought news from the city. The fire had caused only minor damage. Wei Gang had publicly offered a fortune for the return of his missing property, without specifying what had been stolen. On the fourth day, I wrapped Liling's cage in worn cloth and ventured into the lower city. My destination was the river docks, where I could find passage out of the capital. I had memorized the names of captains who transported Wei Gang's illegal goods, men who might be willing to smuggle me away for the right price. I didn't realize then how much I had changed. The elegant scholar Jiang was gone. In his place stood a gaunt, haunted creature with hollow eyes and a voice trained by suffering. Even with my face partially covered, people moved away as I approached, sensing something broken and dangerous within me. Captain Lin of the river barge Jade Heron recognized the seal I carried, stolen from Wei Gang's desk. He looked at me with narrowed eyes but asked no questions about the bundle I refused to set down. "The Chancellor's business, he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My years of performing had taught me that silence often conveyed more authority than words. The journey downriver took 7 days. I spent them in the cargo hold, speaking to no one. Each night I unwrapped Liling's cage and sang to her, softly, private performances that no longer carried my anguish but my promises. "I will unmake him," I whispered to her preserved face. "Not quickly, not mercifully. I will destroy everything he values before I end his life." I had 3 jade pins taken from Wei Gang's treasury, payment enough to establish myself in the river town of Gaoyang. There, I rented a small room above a wine shop and began to transform myself. My voice had been my prison. Now it would become my weapon. I started singing in the wine shop in exchange for meals. Simple folk songs at first, building to complex laments that left hardened merchants in tears. I created a new identity, a traveling performer disfigured in a fire. The partial mask I wore became my trademark rather than a cause for suspicion. I didn't know then that my reputation would spread so quickly. Within months, wealthy merchants requested private performances. I entered homes I would never have accessed as a fugitive, learned secrets, built connections, all while keeping my true purpose hidden behind haunting melodies. A year passed in Gaoyang. I used my earnings to hire messengers, sending them back to the capital with specific instructions. They returned with information about Wei Gang's activities, his new favorites, the names of others who had suffered under his cruelty. I remember the day I received word that Wei Gang had acquired a new nightingale, another scholar who had dared criticize him. My anger nearly revealed my true identity. I broke a wine cup in my hand, the blood dripping unnoticed as I composed myself. The messenger watched me warily. "Find where this new prisoner is kept," I instructed him. "Find who guards him. I will pay double your usual fee." My network of informants grew, former servants dismissed from Wei Gang's household, merchants who had been extorted, families of his victims. Each provided pieces of a puzzle I was assembling, with meticulous care. 2 years after my escape, I left Gaoyang with enough wealth to fund the next phase of my plan. I traveled to provincial cities where Wei Gang's power reached, but his attention rarely focused. In each place, I sought out specific individuals my informants had identified. A courtier whose face had been burned for refusing Wei Gang's advances. He worked now as a mask maker, his artistry born from necessity. When I removed my own mask and told him my story, he wept. "The nightingale," he whispered. "We thought you dead." I found acrobats crippled for a single misstep during Wei Gang's entertainment, scholars blinded for questioning his decrees, courtesans mutilated for his pleasure, then discarded when their wounds turned ugly. Each carried visible scars, each harbored invisible hatred. I spent my 3rd year of freedom gathering these broken people in a deserted temple complex outside the city of Shuling. We created our sanctuary, our training ground, our stage. "We are broken things," I told them, touching my scarred face. "But together we will create terrible beauty." My vision crystallized in that abandoned temple, not a simple assassination, which would only elevate another corrupt official to Wei Gang's position. No, I needed something more profound, a spectacle that would expose the rot at the Empire's core. I would create an opera troupe unlike any the Empire had seen. We began as street performers in small villages, the mysterious masked singers, the contortionists whose broken bodies created impossible shapes, the musician who played haunting melodies despite missing fingers. We were curiosities at first, then attractions. I pushed my performers to transform their suffering into art, to weaponize their deformities, to channel their hatred into performances so intense audiences would be unable to look away. All while I composed our masterpiece, an opera designed specifically for Wei Gang's destruction. Looking back, I marvel at how completely I changed. The scholar who once spent days debating the meaning of a single line of poetry now calculated the exact amount of pain a man could endure before losing consciousness. The husband who had loved his wife with gentle devotion now practiced the art of prolonged suffering. 3 years after my escape, my troupe had grown to 20 performers. We had moved from villages to provincial cities, our reputation spreading like wildfire. The Imperial Grand Opera of Unearthly Delights, led by the mysterious faceless director whose performances were said to induce visions, ecstasy, or madness. All the while, I continued gathering intelligence. I sent my most loyal performers to infiltrate Wei Gang's household as servants, replacing those my agents had carefully removed. Each new person brought more secrets, more weapons for my arsenal. I remember the night we performed in the governor's palace in Shuling, our most ambitious show yet, telling the story of a tyrannical minister and his eventual downfall. The audience was enthralled, never suspecting. They watched their own governor's crimes played out before them. Later that night, as I sat alone with Liling's cage, I knew we were ready. Soon, I promised her, soon I will bring you home to witness his destruction. I didn't realize then how completely Wei Gang would deliver himself into my hands. The underbelly of the empire became my domain. I found power in shadows where once I had sought only knowledge in light. Each broken person I gathered added strength to my company. Each secret collected became another weapon in my arsenal against Wei Gang. Our training intensified in that abandoned temple. I drove my performers relentlessly, pushing them to perfect illusions, mechanical contraptions, hidden trapdoors. We engineered costumes with concealed compartments for weapons or poisons. We practiced quick changes that could transform a performer, from victim to executioner in seconds. I remember the night I revealed my full plan to my inner circle. 7 of my most trusted performers gathered around a table where I had drawn the layout of Wei Gang's palace from memory. Not an assassination, I explained. An execution. Public. Theatrical. His destruction will be witnessed by the entire court. Mei Lin, whose face Wei Gang had burned for refusing his advances, studied the plans with her one good eye. You aim to perform in the Imperial Palace itself? Impossible. I smiled behind my mask. Not impossible. Inevitable. Wei Gang's appetite for novelty grows more desperate each year. His courtiers struggle to find new entertainment shocking enough to please him. I hadn't known then how thoroughly my network had infiltrated Wei Gang's household. Over 4 years, I had placed 17 of my people among his staff, cooks who served his food, servants who prepared his bedchamber, guards who appeared to protect him. Looking back, I realize Wei Gang's greatest weakness was his belief in his own invulnerability. He never suspected the silent servant pouring. His tea had lost his tongue by the Chancellor's order years before. Never recognized the guard at his door as the brother of a girl he had destroyed for sport. Our performances grew more elaborate, more shocking, more sublime. We perfected our craft in provincial cities, each show bringing us closer to our ultimate target. We cultivated patrons among the wealthy who might speak of us in Wei Gang's presence. Word of our troupe spread throughout the empire. The Imperial Grand Opera of Unearthly Delights became the subject of rumors that we carefully cultivated. Some said our performances could induce visions. Others claimed audience members had gone mad from the beauty we created. Many whispered that the faceless director had made a pact with spirits for his artistic power. I encouraged these rumors through carefully placed gossip and staged incidents. After performances, I would arrange for certain audience members to appear transformed, speaking in tongues or claiming religious conversion. Others would seem haunted, unable to eat or sleep for days afterward. During our 5th year of preparation, we received an invitation to perform for Governor Tao of the Northern Province. This would be our greatest test yet, performing before a man who attended court functions in the capital, who might carry word of us directly to Weigang. I spent a month preparing a special performance for Governor Tao, studying his background, his preferences, his secrets. My agents discovered his particular fondness for young boys, kept hidden from his noble wife. This became the hidden subtext of our performance, visible only to those with similar appetites. The night of the performance, Governor Tao sat transfixed, as my performers enacted a traditional tale of imperial succession, subtly altered to reflect his own indulgences. I watched from backstage as his face shifted from entertainment to unease to horrified recognition. After the final act, he demanded a private audience with me. His guards escorted me to his chambers, where he dismissed them with a wave. "Your performance was most illuminating," he said once we were alone, "almost as though you knew certain aspects of my private life." I bowed deeply, maintaining my character as the mysterious artist. "Art reflects truth, Your Excellency, even truths we hide from ourselves." His eyes narrowed. "Who are you really? No mere theater troupe creates what I witnessed tonight." I didn't realize then that this moment would accelerate my plans by nearly a year, that my answer would set in motion the final act of my revenge. "We are artists of the highest caliber," I replied. "We create experiences tailored to our audience. The Chancellor Weigang, for instance, would receive a performance unlike any other." Governor Tao's expression changed. The Chancellor has grown bored with conventional entertainment. Even his collection of human oddities no longer amuses him as it once did. I tilted my head, allowing curiosity to show in my posture. His collection? Specimens with unusual deformities, rare talents, though his most prized acquisition escaped some years ago during a fire. The governor's eyes studied me intently. A singer of unparalleled beauty. "The nightingale," he called. "Him." My heart pounded against my ribs, but my voice remained steady. "How fascinating. And the Chancellor seeks new diversions?" "Desperately," Governor Tao confirmed. "I shall recommend your troupe when I return to the capital next month. Would that interest you?" I bowed again, deeper this time to hide the trembling in my limbs, not from fear but anticipation. It would be the culmination of our artistic journey. 2 months later, the invitation arrived. Official imperial paper, the Chancellor's personal seal. A command performance at the palace during the next Ghost Festival. The anniversary of my escape. I gathered my company that night. "The time has come," I announced. "Each of you must decide. Follow me into the palace knowing we may not return, or remain here in safety." No one left. Each had suffered too much at Weigang's hands to abandon our purpose now. We spent the next 3 months in feverish preparation. Rehearsals ran day and night. We refined mechanical devices to create illusions of magic or spiritual visitation. We practiced rapid scene changes, perfected our timing, sharpened our hidden weapons. Most importantly, we adapted our performance specifically for Weigang. Every scene, every line of dialogue designed to gradually reveal his secrets, expose his crimes, and ultimately trap him in his own perversions. I assigned specific roles to each performer based on their knowledge of the palace or their personal grievances against Weigang. The blind scholar would monitor the audience's reactions. The former courtesan would seduce and distract key guards. The crippled acrobats would secure our escape routes. As the Ghost Festival approached, I sent advance teams to the capital. They carried components of our stage machinery. Unusual props, specialized costumes, all appearing innocent when separated but designed to assemble into instruments of revelation and death. I remember the night before our departure from our temple, sanctuary. I sat alone with Lai Ling's cage as I had every night for 8 years, singing softly to her preserved head. "Tomorrow we return to where it began," I told her. "He believes himself the audience, but he is my performer. His screams will be your funeral song." Looking back, I marvel at my transformation from scholar to architect of revenge, the man who, once spent days contemplating the meaning of ancient texts, had designed a performance that would shatter an empire's corrupted heart. We arrived at the capital during the first day of the Ghost Festival. 30 performers, 12 wagons of equipment, a reputation that preceded us like a cresting wave. Imperial guards escorted us through streets decorated with lanterns and spirit offerings. The palace had been partially rebuilt since my escape. New wings extended where the fire had damaged the eastern sections. The grand courtyard had been expanded, centered around a massive bronze statue of Wei Gang portrayed as a patron of arts and learning. I walked past guards who did not recognize me behind my ornate director's mask. Servants bowed, never realizing I had once been property in this very palace. The Chancellor's major domo escorted us to the Imperial Theater, explaining that Wei Gang himself would inspect our preparations the following morning. The Chancellor has specific requirements for entertainment, the major domo explained, unaware that I knew Wei Gang's preferences better than anyone. He bores easily and punishes disappointment severely. I bowed deeply. We shall present him wonders beyond imagination, a performance he will never forget. That night, as my company prepared our elaborate stage machinery, I sent my most trusted agents on their final missions. Some carried invitations to officials whose presence was essential to my plan. Others placed small containers of specialized incense in the Chancellor's chambers, designed to heighten suggestibility. I didn't sleep. How could I, knowing that the next day would bring me face to face with the architect of my suffering? Instead, I walked the palace corridors, familiarizing myself with changes made during my absence. My performers, disguised as servants or guards, quietly eliminated obstacles, secured escape routes, positioned weapons. By dawn, we were ready. 8 years of planning, 8 years of hatred refined into cold precision. The stage was set for Wei Gang's destruction. I am no longer Scholar Jiang, I reminded myself as I donned my director's mask. I am the faceless director, the nightingale transformed, the instrument of vengeance. And tomorrow, Wei Gang would finally hear my true song. Morning arrived with a fanfare announcing Wei Gang's approach to the Imperial Theater. I stood center stage, my performers arranged behind me in a tableau of respectful anticipation. Each wore elaborate costumes and masks that concealed both their identities and their deformities. Each carried hidden weapons beneath silk and paint. The theater doors swung open. Wei Gang entered surrounded by sycophants, advisors, and personal guards. 8 years had changed him. He had grown heavier, his face flushed with excess, but his eyes retained that same cold cruelty I remembered. The eyes that had watched my castration with clinical fascination. I bowed low, my ornate director's mask hiding the hatred that would have otherwise been plainly visible. Your Excellency honors us with your divine presence. Wei Gang approached the stage, studying our elaborate set decorations and mysterious, mechanical contraptions with obvious interest. Your reputation precedes you, faceless director. They say your performances cause visions, ecstasy, even madness. We seek only to create experiences worthy of your discernment, I replied, my voice deliberately pitched to disguise its familiar quality. What pleases the Chancellor pleases heaven itself. I remember how he preened at the flattery, just as he had done when courtiers praised his artistic tortures years before. I had been counting on his vanity, his never-ending hunger for new sensations. Looking back, I should have recognized the predatory calculation behind his benevolent facade. Wei Gang had not remained Chancellor for 20 years through carelessness. Tell me, he said, running his finger along an ornate set piece, what is the nature of tonight's performance? Governor Tao spoke of extraordinary effects. I gestured to the elaborate backdrop painted with ghostly figures that seemed to change position when viewed from different angles. For the Ghost Festival, we present Reflections of the Self, a journey through memory, desire, and ultimate transformation. Wei Gang's eyes narrowed slightly. Transformation? From darkness to illumination, I explained. From ignorance to profound understanding. He nodded slowly, then surprised me by asking, will you employ music in this production? I once had, a singer of remarkable talents, a nightingale whose voice could draw tears from stone. My pulse quickened. Even after 8 years, he still thought of me, still missed his favorite toy. We use music sparingly, I replied, but effectively. Perhaps your nightingale might attend our performance. We would be honored by such a gifted audience member. Wei Gong's face darkened. Impossible. The creature escaped during a fire some years ago. He paused, studying my mask with sudden intensity. A great loss to my collection. I've never found a voice to equal his. He circled me slowly, and for a moment I feared he might recognize something in my posture or movements. But then he laughed, turning back to his entourage. I had the man sing nightly to his wife's preserved head, he told them, as if sharing an amusing anecdote. A poetess who wrote seditious verses. The psychological effect was most fascinating to observe. I could have killed him then. My hand rested near a concealed blade within my robes. One swift movement would end his life and my suffering. But it would also end my greater purpose. Wei Gang was still speaking, unaware how close to death he stood. A pity about the fire. Both the nightingale and his wife's head were lost, an irreplaceable piece of my collection. Not lost, I thought, waiting, planning, returning with the fury of 8 years. The Imperial Theater will be filled with distinguished guests tonight, Wei Gang continued. Foreign ambassadors, provincial governors, the young emperor himself. I expect a spectacle worthy of the occasion. I bowed again. We shall exceed your expectations, Chancellor. Tonight's performance will be unlike any you have witnessed before. Wei Gang nodded, apparently satisfied. My major domo will attend to any requirements you might have. I look forward to tonight's entertainment. He turned to leave, then paused. I should warn you, faceless director, I do not tolerate disappointment. Nor do I replied softly. After his departure, my company exploded into frenzied activity. We had only hours to make final preparations. The basic structure of our performance had been rehearsed for months. But now we incorporated specific details about the palace, about Wei Gang's current household, about the expected audience members. I didn't realize then how completely fate had delivered my enemy into my hands. His casual mention of the young emperor's attendance was an unexpected gift. The entire power structure of the empire would witness Wei Gang's destruction. Midday brought an unexpected complication. 2 imperial guards arrived with a message from Wei Gang himself. The chancellor requested a private preview performance in his personal chambers. Just a sample of what was to come. I could have refused, cited the need for preparation. But curiosity overcame caution. This might provide an opportunity to assess Wei Gang's new chambers, to confirm the positions of my infiltrators among his household. I would be honored, I told the guards, though I can present only a simplified demonstration without my full company. They escorted me through the palace to Wei Gang's private wing. The route was familiar, though the decorations had changed. New tapestries depicted Wei Gang's supposed military victories. New sculptures presented him as a patron of arts and learning. Wei Gang's personal chambers were even more opulent than I remembered. Jade carvings, gold filigree, rare woods from distant lands. He sat upon a dais drinking wine from a jeweled cup. Faceless director, he greeted me. A private demonstration, if you please. Something to whet my appetite for tonight's performance. I noted the positions of guards, the locations of doors, the arrangement of furniture. Everything information that could serve my purpose later. I am no longer the frightened scholar you broke, I thought. I am your destruction wearing the mask of entertainment. A simple illusion, perhaps, I offered. From my robes, I produced a small mechanical device, a cylinder containing a complex arrangement of mirrors and painted glass. If you would dim the lanterns? Wei Gang nodded to a servant. The chamber darkened. I activated the device, sending projected images of tormented spirits across the walls. Shadows that seemed to reach for the living, faces twisted in eternal suffering. Remarkable, Wei Gang murmured, his eyes following the dancing images. Almost, like actual spirits. An illusion only, I said, adding, though some say it reveals the shadows within one's own soul. As the projections continued, I began to sing softly. Not the haunting laments Wei Gang had forced from me years ago, but something subtly different. A melody designed to unsettle, to create vague recognition without clear recollection. I saw him stiffen, his hand tightening around his wine cup. That song, he said. It reminds me of no, impossible. I stopped immediately, bowing low. Merely an ancient tune, Excellency. If it displeases you, I shall use another for tonight's performance. Wei Gang studied me intently, searching my mask for any clue to my identity. For a moment I feared I had overplayed my hand. Then he shook his head, gesturing dismissively. It matters not. The ghost of memory, nothing more. He drained his cup. Tonight's performance will include more substantial displays, far more elaborate, I promised. Effects that will seem like sorcery to the uninitiated. Transformations that will astonish even your experienced eye. He smiled, the same cold smile I had seen as he ordered my mutilation. Good. I require novelty faceless director, sensations I have not experienced before. I bowed again. You shall have them, Chancellor. I promise you experiences beyond imagination. As I left his chambers, escorted by guards back to the theater, excitement coursed through me like fire. He suspected nothing. The arrogance that had allowed him to display his cruelties openly for decades now blinded him to the retribution at his door. Looking back, I marvel at my control in his presence, how I maintained the charade of the obsequious artist when every fiber of my being screamed for his blood. The afternoon passed in final preparations. My performers took their positions throughout the palace. Some disguised as servants, others as guards, still others as minor entertainment for the pre-performance banquet. Each carried instructions for their role in the night's true performance. An hour before sunset, I knelt alone before Li Ling's cage, which I had kept hidden in my private chamber. Tonight, I whispered to her preserved face, tonight you will witness his fall, just as he forced you to witness mine. I carefully transferred her head from its original cage to a new mechanism we had constructed, one that would serve as the centerpiece of my final act, one that would make it appear that the dead could speak. As darkness fell, I heard the guests arriving, nobles, officials, foreign dignitaries, the young emperor and his regents, and at their center Chancellor Wei Gang, anticipating an evening of unprecedented entertainment. He could not know that he was not the audience, but the unwitting star of my production. That every element of the night's performance had been designed with one purpose, not just to kill him. That would be too simple, too merciful. To unmake him completely, as he had unmade me. The imperial theater filled with the elite of the empire, nobles in their finest silks, foreign ambassadors curious about the famed performance, court officials eager to gain favor by appreciating whatever Wei Gang approved. At the center, the young emperor himself, a boy of 14, surrounded by regents who were merely Wei Gang's puppets. And there he sat in his imperial box, the architect of my suffering, Chancellor Wei Gang. He reclined on silk cushions, a cup of wine in hand, anticipation written across his face. Lanterns dimmed. The audience quieted. My performers took their positions behind the ornate curtain. 8 years of planning had led to this moment. I raised my hands. The drums began. The curtain rose. Our opera opened conventionally enough. A tale of a scholar and his beloved wife, living in harmony until a corrupt minister became entranced by the woman's beauty. The audience settled, believing they knew what to expect. I watched Wei Gang from the shadows of the stage. His initial interest, his gradual recognition of parallels to his own actions, his shifting posture as discomfort began to replace amusement. The second act introduced new elements. The characters now mirrored Wei Gang's victims more explicitly, a poet whose tongue was removed for speaking truth. A beautiful woman kept in a cage for another's amusement. A scholar forced to witness his wife's suffering. Looking back, I realize how perfectly we executed each transition, each revelation. How meticulously we built Wei Gang's growing discomfort. I could see him leaning forward now, wine forgotten in his hand. His eyes darted between performers, tracking the increasingly obvious connections to his private cruelties. The third act brought forth his deepest secrets. Through elaborate metaphor and precisely crafted dialogue, we revealed his bizarre sexual practices, presented evidence of his embezzlement from imperial coffers, named officials he had poisoned to ensure his power remained unchallenged. Whispers spread through the audience. Nervous glances directed at the chancellor's box, the young emperor leaning toward his regent, asking questions that were hurriedly dismissed. Wei Gang stood abruptly. "This performance insults the imperial court," he announced. His voice carried the command of 2 decades of absolute power. "Guards, end this at once." The guards moved toward the stage. My heart raced as our plan entered its most precarious phase. Would my infiltrators hold their positions? Would my performers execute their roles perfectly? I need not have worried. The approaching guards suddenly seized their commander. The doors of the theater swung shut, bolts sliding into place with an ominous finality. Wei Gang's eyes widened in shock. What is the meaning of this? I stepped onto the stage, removing my ornate director's mask. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by disbelief. "Do you remember your Nightingale, Chancellor?" My voice, no longer the broken falsetto of my captivity, but the cold, commanding baritone I had cultivated for 8 years of planning. "Impossible," he whispered. "You died in the fire." "I escaped," I corrected him, taking what was mine. I gestured stage left where my performers wheeled forward Liling's cage, now modified with sophisticated mechanisms of my own design. The ideal audience gasped. Even in death, preserved through Wei Gang's perverse arts, Liling retained a terrible beauty. But now, through hidden springs and acoustic devices, her preserved head appeared to move slightly, as if attempting to speak. "What sorcery is this?" The young emperor stood in his box, both frightened and fascinated. "Not sorcery, your majesty," I replied, bowing deeply. "Merely the revelation of truth long hidden. The chancellor has much to answer for." I gave the yo signal. My performers seized key officials from the audience, men I had identified through years of intelligence gathering as Wei Gang's most corrupt accomplices. Not actors, but the actual men brought struggling to the stage. "Minister Yuan," I announced, "who executed 15 innocent scholars on Wei Gang's orders to hide embezzlement of imperial funds. I didn't know then how completely the audience would turn against their former masters. How quickly fear would transform into righteous anger. My performers brought forth documented evidence, testimony from witnesses, physical proof of corruption. With each revelation, the young emperor's face grew more grave, his regents more terrified. One by one, Wei Gang's corrupt officials met justice on stage. Each died in a manner reflecting their specific crimes or Wei Gang's preferred methods of torture. Minister Yuan, who had ordered tongues cut out, found his own removed before his execution. Judge Lao, who had drowned innocent women as water spirits, was slowly submerged in a glass tank. The audience, realizing this was no mere performance, reacted with shock, then fear, then a strange collective catharsis. Some fled, pounding futilely on the locked doors. Others watched, transfixed by the spectacle of justice long denied. Wei Gang himself was dragged to center stage, stripped of his finery. I forced him to kneel before Liling's cage. 8 years ago, you took everything from me, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the theater. My wife, my manhood, my dignity. But you forgot to take my mind, my patience, my capacity for hatred. I am no longer the broken nightingale, I thought. I am the instrument of your destruction. Wei Gang struggled against his captors, all pretense of dignity abandoned. The emperor will have you flayed alive for this outrage, he snarled. I smiled coldly. The Emperor has seen your true nature, tonight. The corruption you have spread throughout his empire like a disease. I turned to the imperial box where the young Emperor sat rigid with shock. Your Majesty has been surrounded by vipers. Tonight, we remove the serpent's head. To my surprise, the boy Emperor nodded slowly. Proceed, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Let justice be done. With that imperial sanction, I began Wei Gang's dismantling. Not a simple execution, but a methodical deconstruction of the Wu, man who had destroyed so many lives. First, I castrated him slowly, precisely as he once did to me. This is for my manhood, I whispered, ensuring the acoustic properties of the theater carried my words to the audience. His screams echoed through the Imperial Theater, amplified by the design of the space. The same design that had once carried my nightly laments to appreciative audiences now broadcast his agony. Next, I severed his tongue. This is for my wife's silenced poems, I announced, for all the voices you have cut short. Blood splattered across the stage. Some in the audience retched. Others watched with grim satisfaction, recognizing their own suffering in Wei Gang's punishment. The young Emperor did not look away. His regents attempted to shield him, but he pushed their hands aside. I must see, he insisted. I must know what has been done in my name. I hadn't planned for the Emperor's participation, had not counted on his clear-eyed recognition of the corruption that had surrounded him since birth. This was an unexpected gift, an imperial witness to Wei Gang's crimes and punishment. Looking back, I see now that my revenge transcended personal justice. It became a cleansing fire for an empire rotted from within. As Wei Gang's life ebbed away, I leaned close to his ear. You created this performance, Chancellor. Every cut, every scream, a note in the composition you began when you took Liling from me. I placed Liling's cage before his fading eyes. Through the mechanical apparatus I had designed, her preserved head moved slightly, as if nodding in satisfaction. Can you hear her singing? I whispered. The song of your undoing. With his final breath approaching, I addressed the trembling court, the wide-eyed Emperor, the stunned foreign dignitaries. Remember what art a broken man can create when pushed too far. Remember the price of cruelty disguised as power. Wei Gang's eyes clouded, his breathing stuttered. The man who had terrorized an empire for decades died not with dignity, but with whimpers, surrounded by the very monsters he had created. As his body slumped forward, I felt no triumph, no joy. Only the hollow completion of a vow made in blood and suffering. I turned to the young Emperor. Your Majesty has witnessed the cancer at the heart of your court. Will you continue to let such men rule in your name? Or will you take the throne that is rightfully yours? The boy stood straighter, his voice finding new strength. I am the Emperor, not my regents, not dead men who abused my trust. A new fire had been ignited. Not just the end of Wei Gang, but perhaps the beginning of something else. Something I had not anticipated in my single-minded pursuit of vengeance. I nodded toward my performers. The theater doors swung open, allowing terrified nobles to flee into the night. The final act of my performance was about to begin. Wei Gang's corpse lay center stage, surrounded by the bodies of his corrupt officials. Blood pooled across the ornate floor, soaking into the wood that would never again host conventional performances. This stage had become an altar of vengeance, a temple to justice long denied. I stood before the young Emperor, Wei Gang's blood still warm on my hands. The corruption went deeper than one man, I said. The entire court is diseased. The boy Emperor, pale but composed, nodded. I have suspected as much for years. Even as a child, I saw how Wei Gang manipulated my father before his death. I hadn't planned for this conversation, had not expected the Emperor to witness my revenge with such clear-eyed understanding. My performers moved silently around us, securing the theater, preventing interference from outside forces who might still be loyal to Wei Gang. Your Majesty has a choice, I continued. Continue with regents selected by Wei Gang, or claim your imperial authority now. The boy's eyes hardened. I am Emperor, not my regents. not dead men who abused my trust. He turned to the few officials who remained, those who had been too frightened or too fascinated to flee. From this night forward, I rule in truth, not merely in name. I remember the shock on their faces, the realization that their young puppet had found his voice, that Wei Gang's death had severed their strings as well. Looking back, I realized this political transformation was never my goal. I had focused solely on Wei Gang's destruction, never considering what might follow. Yet here it was, a revolution born from my revenge. The Emperor turned back to me. You have committed murder in my presence, multiple murders. I have executed traitors in your presence, I corrected. Men who stole from imperial coffers, who perverted justice, who tortured innocent subjects for their amusement. Including Wei Gang himself, the Emperor said, the man my father trusted above all others. I lifted Liling's cage, holding it so the Emperor could see the preserved head within. This was my wife, a poet whose only crime was writing verses that displeased Wei Gang. He forced me to sing to her severed head every night for 3 years while he watched and laughed. The young Emperor's face paled further, but he did not look away. And the other victims? The people in your company? I gestured to my performers who now removed their masks, revealing faces scarred by burns, torture, disease. Bodies deformed by systematic cruelty or birth defects that had made them collectibles in Wei Gang's human menagerie. Each has their own story of suffering, I said. Each bears the mark of Wei Gang's artistic cruelty or the corruption he fostered throughout your empire. I hadn't known then how completely my company had infiltrated the palace. During our performance, they had eliminated Wei Gang's most loyal guards, secured key positions, established control over critical areas. The palace was effectively ours, at least for this crucial night. The Emperor studied us with new understanding. You did not come here merely for revenge. You came to expose the entire corrupt system. My aim was Wei Gang, I admitted. The rest was necessary to reach him. A commotion at the theater entrance interrupted us. Imperial guards, not ones under my control, attempted to force their way in. My performers braced for battle, weapons appearing from hidden compartments in costumes and props. The Emperor raised his hand. Stop. I will address them. I watched in astonishment as the 14-year-old boy walked calmly to the theater entrance. When the doors opened, he stood framed in the archway, blood-spattered but regal. Wei Gang is dead, he announced to the shocked guards, as are those who aided his corruption. I have witnessed their crimes and approved their punishment. The captain of the guard fell to his knees. Your Majesty, we heard screams. We feared for your safety. My safety was never at risk, the Emperor replied. Only the safety of those who betrayed my trust and stole from my people. I'm no longer the broken nightingale I thought. I have become something else entirely, a catalyst for change beyond my imagining. The Emperor turned back to me. Director, you have committed acts that cannot be sanctioned, regardless of their justice. My performers tensed, preparing for a fight. We had anticipated this possibility, had planned escape routes, hidden passages through which we could vanish into the city. However, the Emperor continued, surprising me again, you have also performed a service to the throne by exposing treachery that threatened the very foundation of the empire. He was offering a way out, a young boy with wisdom beyond his years, recognizing the complex morality of what he had witnessed. The official record will show that Wei Gang and his conspirators were executed for treason on my direct order, the Emperor declared. The faceless director and his company will depart the capital tonight and never return. It was more than I had hoped for. Not merely vengeance, but official acknowledgement of Wei Gang's crimes. Not just my personal justice, but a chance for imperial reform. I bowed deeply. As your Majesty commands. The Emperor approached me, lowering his voice. What will you do now? Your revenge is complete. I looked at Liling's cage, at the face I had carried with me through 8 years of planning. I will lay my wife to rest. After that, I cannot say. The theater emptied. Guards removed the bodies. My performers gathered our essential equipment, abandoned the rest. Within an hour, we were ready to depart through secret passages my agents had mapped years before. Before leaving, I paused on the empty stage. Wei Gang's blood still stained the wood. His screams still seemed to echo in the vast space. 8 years of singular purpose fulfilled in a single night of calculated brutality. I felt empty, hollowed out, the hatred that had sustained me now dissipating like morning mist, leaving nothing in its wake. What remains of a man when vengeance is complete? What purpose drives the sword once it has struck its target? The imperial city was in chaos as we slipped away. Rumors of Wei Gang's death spread like wildfire. Some said demons had torn him apart during a theatrical performance. Others claimed the emperor himself had ordered his execution after discovering treasonous plots. Few would ever know the truth. The revenge of a castrated scholar, the justice of a broken nightingale, the love that had fueled 8 years of meticulous planning. We traveled south, away from the capital, moving only at night. My company remained, loyal, bound by shared suffering and shared catharsis. But our purpose was fulfilled. The opera that had united us had reached its final act. At the edge of the empire, in a small village where Liling and I had once discussed poetry beneath flowering plum trees, I finally laid her to rest. A proper burial, with proper rites. Her preserved head returned to the earth from which she had been so violently torn. I stood alone at her grave as rain fell softly around me. "It is done," I told her. "He suffered as we suffered. He died knowing why and by whose hand." Looking back now, I understand that vengeance cannot restore what is lost, cannot heal wounds so deep they become part of your soul, cannot return a voice to its original song once it has learned the melodies of hatred. News reached us even in our distant exile. The young emperor had indeed taken control, dismissing regents, appointing new ministers, investigating the corruption that had flourished under Wei Gang. A new era had begun, born partially from my revenge. Some in my company chose to remain together, traveling as legitimate performers now. Others departed to begin new lives, their thirst for vengeance slaked by Wei Gang's brutal end. I wandered alone, a man without purpose, the hatred that had defined me for 8 years now gone, leaving a void I did not know how to fill. In distant provinces, I heard whispers of the faceless director and his legendary performance that had brought down a chancellor. Some versions claimed sorcery, others divine intervention. Few captured the simple truth of a broken man's determination. 3 years after Wei Gang's death, I found myself in a small coastal village, working as a music teacher. My voice, once used to entertain a monster, now taught children simple songs of joy and tradition. One evening, as the sun set over the eastern sea, a messenger arrived with a sealed scroll bearing the imperial mark. I opened it with trembling hands, expecting arrest, execution, the delayed justice for my violent deeds. Instead, I found a poem in the young emperor's own hand, a verse about a nightingale who sang truth to power and freed a captive empire from invisible chains. At the bottom, a single line: "Some debts can never be repaid, but they can be acknowledged." I burned the scroll after reading it. The emperor had kept his word, maintaining the official story while privately honoring what had truly occurred. That night, I sang for the first time since Wei Gang's death. Not a lament, not a battle cry, but something new. A song of memory, without pain, of justice without hatred, of a future not defined by the past. I am no longer the proud scholar Jiang, no longer Wei Gang's broken nightingale, no longer the faceless director orchestrating bloody vengeance. I am simply a man who remembers, who carried his wife's severed head across an empire to ensure her killer would pay for his crimes, who transformed suffering into art, art into weapon, weapon into revolution. My voice now belongs to me alone, and that perhaps is the greatest revenge of all.